Welcome to Animator Tech. This is your host, Terry Kellenich. I think I should first let my audience know that I do have a Twitter account. It's very, very new, of course, but you can find that at Animator Tech. And I guess I should also promote my new tutorials that I'm starting in Maya, and that will grow as the days and weeks go by. But you're here for the podcast, so I thought I should do a part 2 of my autobiography. This will create a better canvas for the very first guest that I plan to have on the podcast. The experiences that I will be describing in this episode will basically give you an understanding how I crossed paths with this individual. I guess I'll make the continue the suspense and not tell you who this individual is yet. So you'll find out in episode 3. I'm still in high school, so in grade 12, that was my second last year of high school. I discovered that for my last year, I didn't have very many compulsory credits that I needed to do. It amounted to like 3 or 4 compulsory credits that was required. And I learned about, for my grade 13 year, that I could participate in an internship, because I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to spend every second day of an entire year at a workplace, I'm not going to rely on my co-op teacher to find this placement for me. Because, to be honest, I did not expect any teacher to have any knowledge of studios in the animation industry. It's very unreasonable to assume that they would have connections in that area, since it's not their field. So I took it upon myself in my grade after grade 12. I dedicated my summer time to call up basically every animation studio I could find. And now you got to remember, this is prior to the internet. So, well, prior to mainstream internet. This is 96 or 95, summer 95. So I had to look in the yellow pages. I had to look in company directories in all sorts of places, and I had to do a heck of a lot of phone calling. I just did cold calling. I basically said to them, look, I am planning a internship program with my high school in the following year, and I would like to see if you are interested in having a student be at your studio and work for you for free, of course. But the point of it is to get a first-hand grasp of what it's like to be working in an animation studio. So I took that upon myself to do all the groundwork, finding these studios, talking to the owners, because a lot of these studios were smaller. So I was directly talking to the owners of many of these studios. I don't remember many of them because it was quite a while ago, but I managed to get a few interviews. I think one of them was Bear Spot. I could be wrong on the name, but I remember being interviewed there, and just keep in mind, when I was assuming to do an interview, I took it as if it was an animation interview. So I brought my artwork, I brought whatever animation or whatever drawing skills I had, and some painting skills for that matter, because I did a little bit of acrylic painting and airbrushing. I wanted to show them how dedicated to the art I was. That I wasn't just some student looking for a free credit. I was basically wanting to learn from the source, the people that are making this work in the industry. Most studios were curious. Some of them gave me the interview, and I basically still awkwardly had pick of the litter. I mean, I had 2 or 3 studios in the interview process that basically said after the interview, sure, we'll take you on. We'll show you some things. We'll try to get you to do some in-betweening as long as your skills are adequate for the projects. And then they would list other things that I would be doing, more general work, filing or heck, I think there was one studio that was saying I'd probably be doing some vacuuming too, and it's like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So, one of the last studios that I had an interview with, it was, kind of it was a small-ish studio. It was kind of it was like a house in the middle of downtown Toronto. I'm not sure yet on whether I'm gonna name drop studios very very much or not, but I don't think it really matters at this moment. But this last studio, I had a good feeling about. I remember walking in there, and I had I think it was a white dress shirt and jeans, and I brought my portfolio case, and I had a interview with Paul Sutcliffe, and I was showing him my work, and it's hard to read someone, but I think he saw my enthusiasm for to try to get work. I mean, when I walked in the studio, it just seemed like a next level animation studio that had lots of things going. I mean, it bustled with artwork and trinkets all over the place. It was a very unique studio environment, and I had a good feeling about it. And so shortly after that interview, I did get the call from that studio saying, yeah, we'd love to have you for next year for an internship and co-op program. So basically, what I did for myself is I set up my own co-op program before school started. So everything worked out in terms of the logistics of getting that co-op program to happen. Once my grade 13 year started, I told my co-op teacher, look, I already have a studio lined up. And she said, great. That was one less student for her to worry about, basically. She was very thrilled that I went so far. She probably hasn't met a student that would set themselves up for a work environment before the program even started. I saw in her that she was very happy that I knew what I was doing or had a direction, a sincere path. So basically, when that year started, I can remember some early times working with the camera department. I was assisting 2 camera operators, Mike and Tom. I'll, maybe I'll just give first names. I mean, I kind of want to give their full names because I remember them so vividly. But they were very, very good teachers. They were patient. They had a interesting sense of humor, which, by the way, that's something I haven't talked about, but you should always try to find some humor within the workplace when you have coworkers, whether it's sarcasm, whether it's master of puns, whatever your preference of humor, try to show it early on because it will place a very good foundation for what you'll know pretty soon which people are going to be drawn to that. And when you find people that enjoy that, it really almost is intoxicating, if that's a best word for it. I'm not sure, but there's nothing wrong with humor and at choice moments, and it does relieve stress, of course, and stress will happen at the workplace. That's a guarantee. But for me, with this new co-op program, I couldn't believe that I'm getting 4 credits for the end of the as long as I do it through the end of the year. That I'm doing something I love doing. I'm in an environment that I want to be in, and I have a lot to learn from. And I'm getting credits for it. Sure, I'm not getting paid, but the learning experience is far more valuable than any dollar value than what I learned there. I would say that I was put in a good position at the camera department of the studio because I had some camera knowledge myself just as an amateur videographer, and I had a technical background with computers. Now they weren't using computers for shooting their animation. They were using what was called a quick action recorder, or in short, it was called QAR. They actually used 5.25-inch floppy disks, not the hard 3.5-inch floppy disks, but the bigger floppy black disks to save their shot images. And it's essentially like project files or scene files for anything that's digital today. It was essentially saving all of those frames, and I believe it was also saving the pattern in which the frames were shot, so you can then pull up a scene later. So it was a very, very rudimentary, basic computer for shooting, but it was dedicated for animation. They still had real cameras up on 2 stands, and then they could shoot multiple levels, and those two layers on each side of the desk could merge together to form a multi-layered animation. So that came into play for layouts, layout on one side, animation on the other, or a effects layer on one side and characters on the other, or cell. If the drawings were on cells, they can then just be multi-layered on one camera and shot that way. So I learned a heck of a lot being part of that team, and also throughout my co-op year, I had some opportunities to do some X-sheet filling out, so the pre-planning of shot lengths. It's basically just outlining in numbers and in frames how long certain shots are, and just getting the basics down on paper And I think the old school name terminology is dope sheets, but XSheet is probably the latest term that would be used in any software these days if it was mimicking the traditional animation process. So I was doing some of that. I did a little bit of in-betweening of effects layers, so highlights and shadows. They had to be manually drawn on with traditional animation, and they were doing a lot of commercials. The studio was doing excellent. Had some excellent clients. Very famous commercials, cereal commercials. I think it was Nestle Quick and all this kind of stuff. Lots of commercials like that. I was able to work on one or two of them during my co-op time. But one thing I will say is the people there. There was quite a range of people there in terms of personality types and communication, and how open they are to talk to some young, almost, well, by then I looked like a teenager, but I was in my late teens or 20, 16, 17. Yeah, late teens. So I got to see very quickly who I would gravitate to more at the studio. I will hold off some information that relate to the guest I plan to have on most likely episode 3. So I won't talk much about that, but I would say, so once I was doing this co-op placement every second day, I was still drawing like mad every day because I'm able to see how professionals draw in that studio, and I knew that I had so much work to do. The level of quality of line work, of animation knowledge, skills, so much I didn't know. It just opened my eyes when I saw some of the processes and how traditional animation is actually done, and dealing with your timing charts and planning things out and using cutting and pasting even to help you structure your character's face in different angles, or different rotation angles, and there's very traditional thinking on how you can get that job done a little faster. It was stuff I never thought of. So I was very. It was a little intimidating in some way because I now got to stand beside someone who is so much more skilled than I am, and it's like, whoa. And I thought I was getting somewhere. I am so far behind. And so it at least gave me a better perspective that I have so much more to learn. So that, I think, had good value. And so I did. And I drew all the time. So even when I traveled on the subway, it took about an hour, maybe an hour and a half actually, to get to the co-op program. So that gave me a solid hour and a half to draw in the bus and in the subway, everywhere. I didn't care if the bus was on a bumpy road going, very fast on the road, and I didn't have a very sturdy a book to draw on. I just drew anyway. And what it trained me to do is it made me draw faster. So I learned to get the point across with quick, loose lines. And it made me structure my process of drawing in a sketch format to be very deliberate line, and just and if it doesn't work, you just do another one. It's not like, I hit a bump when the bus was going and now I ruined the drawing. It's like, no, you just keep going. And so it made me not worry about making a mistake. I never had an eraser with me. So I learned that the eraser is not part of this process. What I need to learn is how to draw, not how to erase. So it was very interesting drawing that like that, and I had lots of hours to do it. And so essentially I had almost 3 hours every day, not including drawing at home. So I really got a good foundation that last year, and it gave me a good understanding about what I need to do to get to my goal at that time, and that was to Sheridan College for the classical animation program. Little did I realize that you can't just get into the animation classical program. You had to do a year of what they call art fundamentals. I basically learned all I could. I spoke to artists that went to Sheridan, and I learned about what the expectations of the portfolio are, and I basically did that test and I did qualify to get into art fundamentals. I think that was 96 or 97. I keep forgetting which year now. That was the beginning. What I felt was that was the beginning of my training for my career. Now, the co-op program, in a way, was more direct than even Sheridan, but you'll know why later. But when I can fast forward 1 year in Sheridan and just say that I put my all into that program. I had to travel 2.5 hours every day due to unfortunate train connection timing and bus connection timing. I had to wake up at like 4:30 for several days a week. I forget how many days, but it was tough. However, it gave me more time to draw. So I looked at the brighter side and said, well, I need to draw anyway. So it gave me several hours of just more of what I needed. Art fundamentals is not easy. They deliberately stack the work on you to test you. They are trying to filter out those that can and can't handle the pressure. So there's a deliberate intensity, especially near the end of the program, that, to be honest, I would say more than half fail in terms of accomplishing all of the tasks that needed to be accomplished. They stack all of the workload together. So each course, there's painting courses, there's design, there's architectural, image design, I think they called it. There's even photography. There was life drawing. There was sculpting. There was history. All these courses together, stockpiled near the end, and you either had no life, absolutely no free time, or you're not going to get it done. So I went to the absolute extreme limits to what my physical body can handle, and I do not recommend doing this. I was young, at least, so I did not feel the potential harm I could have done to myself. But I stayed up for 91 hours. I can't believe that I did that when I look back and think back on it. But I needed to, I said to myself, look, if I don't accomplish all of my projects and get it done on time, this is it. I've failed. I've failed to my first test in getting into the doors of my educational career for animating, because I looked at this as my career entry. So I had the attitude of like, look, this is it or nothing. And it's like I said in the first podcast, it's very dangerous to put all your cards on the table like that and just all or nothing attitude. Fortunately, I was the top 14, one of the top 14. I don't know to what level, but there was only 14 people accepted for what they called direct entry into classical animation, and I qualified for it. That gave me so much reassurance that I am suited for this path. I aimed for the target and I hit the target. But again, I must stress, this is so dangerous if you don't hit that target. If I wasn't the top 14, if I didn't get direct entry, I still had a chance to qualify for next year. I just wouldn't have. Direct entry didn't require you to make a portfolio for the next year. They basically said, look, we know your skills are enough to get into the program. So I went for that goal when realistically I didn't have to. But I needed to push myself to see how far I can go. So again, I will say, try not to do that very often, because you're putting so much pressure on yourself for one goal when there is not just one way to do it. There is more than one option to get into the industry. It is not Sheridan or nothing. Sheridan is a great start, but to me, I took it like almost like a life and death situation. So I would just caution you again on that. Go for as far as you can go, but don't think it's the end of the world if you did not achieve what you set your goal to be. Because I was amongst very good artists. Everyone there in our fundamentals is very good at what they do. So you got to keep your perspective proper here. You don't have to be the best to get in, but being the top tier gives you at least something to measure from. So that's what I did, and I think I'll just end my autobiography there, since that was a very difficult time for me, and it was a great stress reliever, of course, but the next chapter of my autobiography is not as expected as you would think. So I'll continue that for another episode, or I may merge that into, if a guest has the subject that brings this up, then I'll be sure to note that in the description, so you'll know that it's sort of an internal part 3 of my autobiography. So with that, I'll end it there. Please like this podcast if you enjoyed it. I encourage you to share it, and even on Twitter if you like it that much. And definitely share this to any animator that's looking to try to get in the industry, and they can at least relate to some of this. And I'm sure they'll enjoy the story at least. And we'll end it there. Please follow my YouTube channel, Animator Tech. I have Maya tutorials that I'll be increasing as days go by. And if you have any questions, you can definitely ask me in the comments below. And And we'll end this podcast right there. Thank you very much for your time.